Welcome to a whole series of tutorials on using Karin markers to create a foliage wreath and some letters. My name is Amanda Arneill, and I'm so glad that you are joining me for the first in this series. For your materials, you're going to need some clean water, some paper towel, 6 Karin markers, and the colors you're going to need are the lime green 071, grass 253, ocean teal 377, Arctic blue 264, orange red 051, and sepia 075. In today's tutorial, we are only going to be using ocean teal. You're also going to need to have a favorite water brush or paintbrush in order to blend out the marker, and a pencil is definitely something that will come in handy just to help give you some guidelines for your foliage. Since we're just going to be working on learning the technique, you can use a small swatch of watercolor paper. The Canson Watercolor XL works really well, or the Canson Heritage paper. Either one of those papers will work very nicely for creating a gorgeous foliage piece. So today we are going to be working on this style of foliage. It is a pointy foliage style. It's a bit of a meandering foliage piece, which means that it doesn't go straight and you have some extra foliage branches coming off on the sides. Now, for this style, it's really nice because you can weave it and make it work within a piece to fill extra spaces, because it doesn't need to look a certain way every time. To get started, let's draw some guidelines for where our foliage will go. First, you want to draw one foliage line on your page. Now, off of this, you want to add other branches. So make those branches come off to the sides, sort of to fill in the rest of the space. And you can even have small branches coming off of those branches. I would suggest making maybe 5 branches. Now, I've noticed that this branch and this branch are exactly parallel to one another, which is a little bit too perfect for nature. So if you have done anything like that with one of your lines, just erase it and you can always draw in a different style of branch, going a different direction. Remember that nature is random, and that's what we're looking for here. Now pick up your ocean teal marker, and we are going to start to add some color to the page. Now, one thing that I want you to notice is that there is quite a bit of color variety within this foliage. That means that we have light areas and we have dark areas, and we're going to achieve that by not fully coloring with the marker. You're going to use this to add some color to the page, but most of the work is going to be done with your paintbrush or water brush. Choose your longest bit of foliage right in the middle, and you're going to add tiny little V's. They almost look like tiny hearts. One right off the tip, and then a few on either side of the branch. I would suggest doing about 4 at a time and then go in and blend it out. So since we want our leaves to have a pointed shape, we are going to take one side of the heart, pull it up to a point, and then from that top point, bring your brush down. You want to ensure that you have an empty space in the center, and if it's too large, you can always pull your color in a little bit, but that empty space there is going to help to give even more variety to your piece. Now, one thing I noticed was I had a lot of water on my water brush on the tip as I started painting, which meant that a lot of paint flowed up that water channel as I created it. You probably want to make sure that after you either add some water to your brush or start to use your water brush, that you just dab it onto some paper towel to take the extra water out of the tip of your brush. So here we've got another heart. You're going to pull one side up. This time I'm using a paintbrush instead of the water brush. And you can tell if you have little bits of paper showing through, your brush is not wet enough. So get it a little bit wetter. And then from the top, pull down to meet the other side of your heart. Now, the reason that we're going from the top to the bottom is that it leaves a light space up top, but it does still allow the paint to flow up once you hit that other side of the heart. I'm going to switch back to the water brush. I do find a water brush a little bit easier to do this because you don't always have to be adding water to your brush. Instead, just make sure that you take the excess water off of your brush by lightly dabbing it onto your paper towel before you go in and create your leaf shape. Now remember that leaves grow in all directions and sometimes they even curl. So you can add a slight curl to some of the leaves and then go in and smooth out the sides. Growing in all directions. And remember that if you have too large of a space in the center, just go in and touch that up a little bit to make it a little smaller. We're using that center line sort of as a hint of the vein or reflection in the middle of your leaf. Once you've finished all four, you can go in and create more hearts down the length of your stem. And sometimes those hearts can be together and sometimes they can be spaced further apart because you want to have variety in your leaves. Go into one side, pull it out. And if you need to turn your page in order to get your proper strokes, that's totally fine. Start from the top and come on back down. If you need to, fill in a little bit of that center reflection line. And do this for all of your leaves. You just want to make sure that you're keeping things to think about, keeping the point at the top, closing up that reflection space so it looks like a reflection instead of a big hole in the center of your leaf, like a caterpillar's come along and attacked it. Pointy at the very end. And also you want to look for the lighter tip. So for instance, this one got really, really dark because I had too much water in my brush, so dab that brush off regularly. But if you notice, so let's pull the color up. If you notice you have too much color, you can always go in with an empty water brush, or it works even better if you use an empty paintbrush and pick up some of that extra paint to lighten up your leaf. Now I've noticed here both of these leaves are pointed the exact same. So in that case, I'm going to curl this one down. You want to watch to make sure that you don't have leaves that seem to be repeating one another. All right, now that we've done a cluster of leaves, we need to go back before they get too dry and add a little bit more color to the base. So still using your ocean teal marker, you want to just dab right into the very bottom of each of the leaves. If you do it while they're still wet, you'll get a little bit of creeping of the color up the leaf, but that will just help it look very, very natural. So we're just dabbing right in the base of the leaf. And if you notice, like this leaf looks quite dry, that's the one where we picked up a lot of color. It's not really blending, so you can always just go in and give it a little bit of a nudge to blend it out ever so slightly. But we do want to have that rich, deep color right at the base of the leaf. So as that goes, you can continue down your leaf, but I would suggest do a clump of them, add that color at the base, and then move on to your next section. At the very tip of each one of your branches, you're going to have one leaf there every time, and usually that one's a little bit smaller. Also try to vary the placement of your leaves and try to ensure that you are varying the shape. Go through and fill up the rest of your branches before we move on to drawing in the stem. Once you're finished, you will notice that you have areas where it's light, areas where you have sort of a middle color, and then areas where it's really, really dark. And if you're missing those dark areas, or they're only concentrated in one part of your piece, you can always go in and add some more elsewhere. Like I'm noticing that I have quite a few dark ones right along here, not so many where it's super ultra dark along here. You can always still go in and tap right at the tip of your leaf to add a bit of that deep, rich color all throughout your piece. It's that variation between the light, the medium, and the dark that will really make this stand out. Now it's time for us to go in and add in our stem. I have noticed that, some of my tips of my pens just aren't as pointy as I might like. So rather than going in and drawing, because you really do want to get a delicate, delicate line, you can transfer some of the watercolor paint onto your brush and use your brush in order to get those thin lines. So either if you can control your water brush using just the tip of your water brush, or you can grab an ultra small, this is a 00 brush, to go in and draw those stem lines. Get it a little bit wet, tap off that extra water, and then let it have a little bit of a kiss session with your marker to load that brush up with that exact same color. Still the Ocean Teal 377. Now, once your brush is loaded up, you're just going to drag down from leaf to leaf. And I like to use sketchy sort of lines to do this. You don't need it to be absolutely perfect. And the reason that I like the sketchy lines is they look a lot more natural. If you start to find that your brush is getting a little bit dry, your color's not coming off in the same way, you can either load up with more color or just tap the water to get a little bit more water onto your brush before continuing to paint your stem lines in. And continue it all the way down past the bottom of your last leaf, because usually you don't cut a stem right at the base of that bottom leaf. You give yourself a little bit of space underneath. And that's the look we're going for here. So sketching in from leaf to leaf, attaching it onto that main stem. And where it attaches, it is going to be a little bit thicker. So don't worry if you have a few lines coming together. That's actually what you're looking for. Now I'm noticing it's starting to get quite light. That's because when you add more water to your brush, it thins out the amount of paint. So you can always go back, let them have another little session together, pulling your paintbrush along the tip of your pen to load it up with more color. And then continue to draw in your stems. If you need to turn your paper in order to make sure you get nice smooth lines, please do that. It'll just make it so much easier for you. And we want this to be an easy and fun process. If you also notice that there are areas where your stem looks a little bit too light, because it should look like it matches the bottoms of your leaves, you can always just go back in and give those a little bit more color now that your brush has more color loaded up onto it. And there you go, we have made a beautiful natural looking branch. It's so nice and full. It has lots of interest with the different color values, with the very, very light color areas, the medium color areas, and those super ultra saturated color areas. What I want to point out is that we only use the pen to add a touch of color to the page, and then the rest of it was all done with your paintbrush or your water brush. That's how you get the variation of color values, and when you put this together in a larger piece, that variation will give you so much added visual interest. Your first leaf is done. I want you to practice this until you can master all of those elements, getting that nice shine to your leaves. And once you feel confident with this, move on to leaf number 2 in the next tutorial in this series.